so it's just the beginning of October. I'm starting to just get started doing my display for the World Championship Tournament for ACBA 2015. And, you know, I entered pretty much right when it popped up. The first like hour, the registration popped up. Clenched my spot, paid for it, and kind of just sat for a couple weeks marinating, trying to come up with a good idea. So first when I'm coming up with my idea, I try to think of what other people are going to do and try to steer away from that. So this round is Fright Night. You know, zombies, monsters, slasher flicks, gore, pretty much anything savage. So I thought this one was a pretty solid idea. Open them shits, pose them shits. So, I mean, probably won't see anybody doing Nightmare Before Christmas. I've seen Nightmare Before Christmas pictures before, but I don't think we'll see any this time. The only thing is, I'm going to have to build the scene. I'm going to have to build pretty much everything from scratch. The dial, the scene, everything. I can't really reuse anything. And then I got to think of props, effects, backdrops. You know, I watched the movie a couple times to kind of get amped up, and nothing really, no scene really got my juices flowing where I was like, oh, I'm going to do that scene right there. So I'm kind of, you know, I'm kind of torn between that. So, I mean, this one I think definitely would be pretty dope. But right now I'm kind of not feeling it, so. So the one I'm leaning towards the most right now would be using Evil Dead 2 Ash. So I was thinking about doing a mix between Evil Dead and Night of the Living Dead kind of thing. So have Ash holding down it. Sweet. So have Ash like holding it down inside the cabin. You know, have Ash holding it down inside the cabin. Damn, dude, he's got me no bow leg. You know, have Ash holding it down inside the cabin. And freaking have a bunch of zombies trying to get in. But Toys R Us last year, they had like a big old sale where everything was, you know, like, at first they did like the 20, 30, 40% off, and everything got to like 80, 90% off. Well, they had a bunch of these Mego figures, like the real Ghostbusters cartoon, and the DC heroes like Black Adam, Shazam. I think those were like the biggest peg warmers. But they had them all for $1. So I was able to swoop up Shazam, Black Adam, and then about like 4 of these real Ghostbusters figures, something from the cartoon, for $1. So I mean, these are really easy to customize. I can make these look like zombie stuff, and you know, have them outside trying to come in. You know, I was thinking about having some windows and boarded up, you know, busted up drywall and boards, and then busting through, and he's like holding it down. So that's pretty much where I'm at on this right now. I'm leaning more towards this one, because I don't think we'll see anybody use Evil Dead 2 Ash from NECA, the like retro doll figure, and then these would be totally just customized zombies, which that's pretty much why I bought them, to customize them. I don't really give a shit about these figures. I mean, they barely stand up. Well, actually, stand up pretty good, but these ones, okay, I totally got shut down. They all stand up. Scrapping this idea. So, you know, originally I had Evil 2 Dead Ash, the NECA retro figure. I had these retro Mego style doll figures, and I was gonna customize them into zombies. A little bit of paint, a little bit of sculpt. Scrapping that idea. You know, thought it was a pretty solid idea. I mean, it is a pretty solid idea. But, you know, I have a feeling there is gonna be a lot of zombie entries, and especially in competition, I try to think outside the box more, try to do stuff that a lot of people aren't doing, a lot of people haven't done, you know, at least attempt to do that. You know, so I was messing around the page and I seen someone had asked, you know, since it's the first round is horror and Halloween themed, do we have to use like horror and Halloween themed figures? No, of course not. You know, it's be creative, you know. It is your own interpretation. So, you know, after reading that, I was like, oh man, you know, I should be a little more creative, you know. And then Boog had posted something about, you know, pretty much what I said, you know, being creative is the key, you know, and that's something I've always known, and that's something that I use as motivation when I'm doing displays and stuff. Be as most creative, think outside the box, you know. You know, sometimes when you hear somebody else say it, or you see it right there, it's kind of just like, alright dude, that's a sign, scrapping this idea. So I do have a secret weapon. I have a little card up my sleeve, that something that I've been wanting to do for a while.
swooped up this NECA Shrambo figure. So I got John Rambo. Got this at Toys R Us for $5 when they had that crazy like end of the year sale. I had a custom idea for him. And then I swooped up this suited Alias dude, like Sloan something. And also for a custom to go with John Rambo. Pop off this dude's head. Obviously skin tones don't match yet, and he looks all goofy, but he's gonna be turning from John Rambo to John Nada from They Live, John Carpenter's They Live, one of my all-time favorite movies. Rowdy Piper is a freaking savage in that movie, so I've been wanting to make a John Nada figure out of this base forever. So I heat and popped Piper's head off a WWE figure. So all I pretty much have to do is repaint the boots, do a little highlight to make the jeans look a little more worn, sculpt some shirt sleeves and the collar, and do a repaint and make the flesh tones match. Homeboy gets turned into an alien, so I'm going to have to sculpt a little bit on his face and just change his colors to blue and a little bit of red. And then I also picked up these when they first came out. I picked up 2 of them for the same reason. So this is something that, you know, I've been kind of just building stuff around for a while. So I'm gonna see if I can pull this one off, see what I can do. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody else's entries. It's gonna be badass. It's gonna be a badass tournament. And you know, now I gotta get to work. I got a little bit of things to do. I mean, I have a couple of dio pieces I have to make. I have to customize these dudes and him, so I got a lot of customizing to do. You know, something I could crank it out. So it'll be fun. We'll see what I can come up with. So if you're not familiar with the movie They Live, it's a movie by John Carpenter, released in 1988, filmed mainly in downtown Los Angeles, starring Rowdy Piper and Keith David, and it's based on the short story by Ray Nelson called 8 o'clock in the morning. So basically, Rowdy Piper is a drifter in the movie. He comes across a pair of these sunglasses, and when he puts the sunglasses on, he sees that the world isn't what it seems to be. That in fact, we've been invaded by aliens, and they slowly integrated into our society, and they're starting to take over. And simple things like a billboard, magazines, money, store signs, street signs, everything is actually brainwashing us without us knowing. So without the sunglasses, it's a normal stop sign, a normal billboard, money. With the sunglasses on, it actually reveals its real meaning. Stuff like obey, conform, marry and reproduce, and so on. So I highly recommend watching this movie. If you're a fan of 80s movies, if you're a fan of horror, sci-fi, any of those genres, I definitely recommend watching this movie. It's such an interesting, it's such a unique movie, and it's definitely in one of my top 5 favorite movies. And it's one of those movies I can continue watching and really never get tired of it. And a little fun fact too, if you haven't guessed already, street artist Shepard Fairey, the guy behind Obey clothing line, he drew a lot of his inspiration from this movie. And Rowdy Piper has so many classic lines in this movie, and he just all around kicks ass. So definitely go check it out. Do it. So I started off with my suited guy for one of the aliens. So what I do, I heat and popped Homeboy's head off, and I got my Dremel, and I Dremeled off his eyes, his eye sockets, his eyebrows, and his mouth area to get ready for sculpting. And I also lightly sanded everything too, and cleaned it real good prior to adding the sculpt and everything. So for the sculpt, I used Milliput epoxy. I used the yellow and gray blend. So I sculpted his round bug eyes, his teeth, and some cheekbones on him. And where I kind of goofed up is I added extra sculpt to his forehead, hoping that when I paint it, it kind of adds texture to his alien skin, but it actually looks really sloppy. So on my next custom, I didn't do that. So after I was finished with all the sculpting, I sanded it all nice and good, all the parts that I was going to paint. I cleaned it again with soap, water, and a toothbrush, and I started laying out all the red, and I used Citadel paints. So I laid out all the red spots first, then I'm going to go over with blue, and then another coat of blue, and then red again. And here's the final product. So yeah, like I said, I did the red first, then I did a couple layers of blue, and then I did red again, and then after everything was done, I made a couple lighter shades of blue and tried to dry brush it on some areas that stuck out, like his hands, his cheekbones, some parts of his forehead, and then I added black to the teeth and the eyes, and some black washes in some area to make stuff pop and to get some of that texture in there. And I also repainted his hair a couple of different shades of brown to give it more texture. And his eyes are supposed to be like a metallic-y gray silver. I just mixed black and white, and I just made a lighter gray. And then his chin is like this bone slash skin tone color. I just had a little bit of white to a skin tone I had. So on my display, he's the one that's dropping a dime on Rowdy Roddy Piper, letting his homeboys know what's going on, and actually made a little communication watch for him too. What I did, I just got a bendy tie that comes with the figures. I added a little bit of sculpt on it, and then once it dried, I just painted it. That way I could morph it to his wrist. Because in the movie, all the aliens have a little communication watch they use to communicate with each other and do other things. So next up, I got the NECA T1000 from the new Terminator movie, and I gave him the same treatment, dremeled out his eyes, eyebrows, eye sockets, and his mouth. And I definitely think I did a better job on this one than with the suited dude. I got the eyes, I think, a little bit better, and then I was able to get the teeth, I think, a little bit better as well. So I'm definitely a little more satisfied with this one than the suited dude. So I did the same prep and paint technique that I did with the first one, and like I said, this one definitely came out a little bit better than the first one, so I'm definitely satisfied with that. And what I did is I only customized one head, so the other one has the explosion effect like his head's getting blown off. So in the movie, John Nada, he actually wears his shirt as a 3/4 sleeves, so his sleeve is rolled up just past his elbow. Well, I knew there'd be a lot of paint rub if I did it like that, so I did it with just a half sleeve where the cuff is just above his elbow. So sculpting the collar was pretty fun. I actually had to go back a couple different times and add to it to make it more realistic looking. And you can see originally I had sculpted pockets on his chest, and after I painted and everything, his upper body looked so weak because the Rambo figure actually had a rubber shirt, so I took that off, and it made his upper body so much smaller. So after I painted everything, I had to go back and I had to add a bunch of sculpt to make his chest and upper body look bigger, and I didn't feel like adding more pockets again. So the final product came out pretty good. I mean, some of the paint and sculpt is a little messy, which I definitely want to go back and clean it up a little bit. I just didn't want to spend my whole time on this competition messing around with the figures. I wanted to do half and half. So, for the time being, I definitely think it came out dope. So the Rowdy Piper head I used was from a WWE Legends 2-pack, the one that came with him and Cowboy Big Bob Orton. And I added a bunch of different shades of brown, going from dark to light, to make his hair pop a little bit more. And those sunglasses came from a WWE like John Morrissey, whatever his name is. He came with these sunglasses, which I had to sand down and add sculpt to get the shape I wanted, and then I just painted it black with Citadel paint. So that shotgun I chose to use was from the NECA Planet of the Apes Caesar. And then I also dremeled all the disc hinges. That way, when I painted them, there was no joint rub. So I was really stoked that that worked out. So I just kept adding different shades of blue, going from dark to light to get that kind of faded 80s jean look. And then the boots that came with Rambo were actually like perfect. They're like almost the same exact style that Piper wears in the movie, but just a different color. So I just had to add that like tannish color and then a different color for the gum part of the boot. So that actually worked out perfect. So it took me forever to finally make these custom figures, and I'd laugh my ass off if NECA picked up the licensing and finally decided to make them, or a different toy company. That would be ridiculous. But I would be hella stoked. So I usually make my own custom cutouts. I use the ACBA cutouts a lot. I did in this competition. And sometimes I'll photocopy straight out of comic books, or I'll Google image them and find them straight out of comic books and size them up or down. But usually making my own custom ones is what I do the most. So what I do, I find a comic bubble shape that I like. In this case, this is the one, but I want it the other way. So I flip it the opposite way. I get the eraser, and I erase all the current letters that are in there. And once that's all cleaned out, I go to the text tool, and I start typing in what I want. And you just have to usually just scale it up and down. So for this one, I'm going to say goodnight, formaldehyde face. Because he says something like that in the movie, not exactly like that, but, something like that. And most of the time when I do it like this, it's just a lot of trial and error. You got to see what words are going to work. You got to see what size is going to work. You got to make sure you can read it. You got to make sure it's going to fit in the bubble. And one big thing too about creating your own customized bubbles is make sure that your punctuation and your spelling's on point. Don't be spelling stuff wrong or adding wrong punctuation. So the reason that I choose pre-existing bubbles and just erase the current dialogue and add my own is because when I print them out, I know what size they're going to be. So there's a couple different ones that I use that I know if they're going to be bigger, they're going to be smaller, and what size they're going to be about. So the printer ink for my printer is a little expensive. So what I do is I go to Staples or Office Max and I bought a bunch of cardstock for cheap when it was on sale. And then I go to the local copy shop with my USB drive and I use one of the copiers myself and I print out a bunch of color copies. And that way it's a lot cheaper because you're using your own paper. So I made a couple different bubbles for each dialogue just to make sure when I had the setup that the bubble's going to be in the proper placement. So the say goodnight formaldehyde face, I have it coming from the left and the right. I made a small one too, the don't lose your head coming from the left, just in case. The blackow, and then the fire effect is from the ACBA cutouts. And then the description, the white male, 30s, long hair. I made that one just a bunch of different angles because I would hate to get my setup all right, even though I did a little practice mock setup and the little bubble's not in the right position or it's blocking something or you can see where it's coming from. So I kind of just made extras just to make sure that everything's good and I don't have to make a second trip to the copy shop. So along with my signs, billboards, and banners and my speech bubbles, I also made a couple cutouts for the TV screen. So this is a little TV, an old school TV that I made a long time ago, a little prop. And I made a little feature where I could put a picture on a little piece of cardboard and slide it in for the screen. So in this case, I have like the president as an alien with the Obey banner in the back. I could slide that underneath, and then boom, I got an image on the TV screen. So I also have a little WWE TV that I made a little cutout for the screen. That way to help fill up my little window display a little bit more. So for one of my effects, I'm using a head explode effect. So I decided to make this one from scratch. So the way this figure is the head has the neck attached to it with a peg. So that pops off. So once you pop the head off, he has an empty collar with the hole that goes down inside for the peg. So for that, I got a dowel rod and I shaved it down with my Dremel, drilled a couple little holes on the dowel, little piece of dowel rod, and snaked through some bendy ties. And I actually had them long bendy ties. I should have made them a little bit longer. And then I just kept layering hot glue just over and over. It took a while because I had to let it dry. And you could probably do it faster by dipping it in cold water, but I didn't want to do that. So I just kept layering hot glue after hot glue and kind of teasing it to make it look a little nasty, to make the blood kind of look exploding and kind of propelling outwards. And the reason I chose to use a bendy wire to make it a little posable, so be a little more versatile, so I might be able to use it in different ways. I don't know. I just thought it'd be a good idea. But I definitely wish I would have kept some of the bendy wire strings a little bit longer to let that blood fly out. Just a little bit longer. And the way I made it, you can easily just slide it in and out. So there's the peg. You can put it back in and take it out with ease. And so I just kept adding layers of red Citadel paint, and then I made a darker red Citadel, and then I did a little bit of wash in there too to kind of give it more texture and to kind of give it more depth. But yeah, like I said, I definitely wish I would have made some of the blood spurts just fly out just a little bit longer. I'll definitely have to remember that next time I do this. And after it was all dried and finished, I did add a small layer of Mod Podge on it just to give it a little bit of a gloss and to keep the paint from rubbing or flaking off when I'm bending it and messing with it. And you can see it retains its on and off capabilities, and it is posable, and none of the paint flakes off or rubs or anything. So my reference and inspiration picture for the diorama and kind of the scene would be this little fan-made arcade style picture that I found. I like the street view, the storefront with the alley. I think it kind of tied into the movie and it would kind of transfer good over into a display. So this is kind of what I decided on right here. And I do have a smaller, I have a 1/18 scale cop car that I was going to try to put in front of the camera to make it look like a full-size cop car. But it was a 2006 model cop car and this movie's from the 80s, so it wouldn't have translated. So for one of the alleyway walls, just real generic, I got a piece of pink foam, cut a brick pattern design, cut out a rectangle for the door, and then just a small rectangle where there's going to be a little vent, just to get a little more detail. And then I added a black wash onto it and waiting for it to dry and then going to paint it up. So I used apple barrel paints and I made just a couple different colors of red and started adding that on there. And I add a little bit of texture after the black wash with a little coral covered rock I found at the beach. So for the door, I wanted to try something a little bit different. It was based off this door I seen at a warehouse one time. It was like this big, sturdy wooden door. So I got a piece of that pink foam and some thin project foam that I put over the front. And then those little hinges on the side, like I don't even know what they're from. They're from this little scrap pile I have. They're just like little pieces of plastic. And so I just glued all that together, and then I'm going to black wash it and then just keep adding layers of paint. So I like the way the door came out. It looks pretty dope, except for the doorknob. The doorknob makes it look really cartoony. So I think I did pretty solid other than the doorknob. So this is going to be the sidewalk / alleyway. So I made the sidewalk piece. I sanded it real good right there in the front, in the middle. So it's kind of like the rampway or like the driveway. And then I'm going to make like a little gutter piece running down the middle of the alleyway going into a little grate. And I had this little grate piece. I think it was a Spider-Man base that came with the light pole. It had a nice looking grate. I dremeled and I broke the piece off and it fits in there perfect. So all the carving's done. I did the black wash, and then after that I'm just going to keep adding different layers of paint for the sidewalk and for the alleyway. And I'm going to add Mod Podge on the actual alley part to give it some gloss. So in the little gutter part that's leading into the drain, I'm going to keep adding small layers of Mod Podge just in that groove. I'm going to add a small layer and let it dry, and then a small layer and let it dry, so it kind of builds up, so it looks like there's just a little bit of scummy water going right into that drain. And the key is to do just little bits at a time, so that way there's no air bubbles, and that way it dries quicker. So next up is the storefront. So I have a cutout where the door is going to be, and where the window is going to be, where there'll be a window display. I just did a basic brick design. And then on the top, it's just going to be like a cement, concrete looking design. And then I also used that coral covered rock to give it a lot of texture. And a lot of these pieces I'm making are very generic. That way it's kind of versatile, so I can use it for different scenes. So I added a bunch of different grays for the concrete look, and then also a bunch of different shades of red for the brick look. So I'm actually going to try to put a piece of plastic there for the window. So I cut the big square out from the back side. I measured it out, so I cut that all the way, about halfway through the foam. Then on the inside, I cut it all the way, just to where the line I cut. So then I can pull that piece out and slide that piece of plastic in there, glue it in there, and then put the backing on. So there's a secure piece of plastic glass. And now for my storefront, there's a permanent piece of glass right there. So that way I can do window displays and I can use it for a bunch of different stuff. For the storefront door, I got some of that action figure packaging plastic that I just used for the window. And I cut out a big rectangle for that. And with the project foam board, I cut that out, painted it black, and then I just glued it on top. And I actually glued the door securely to the structure, so it's not removable or anything. It's going to be there permanently. And for the storefront, I made a consume marquee. So instead of it saying grocery store or liquor store, it just says consume. And I'm not going to have it permanently on the structure. I'm going to hold it on by blue tack, so it'll be removable, so I can make a different one for a different scene in the future. So this is going to be the little mini stage that holds the window display. So out of some scrap pink foam pieces and some project foam board, I just painted it black and glued it all together. So that way I could put this behind the storefront window, so that could be the window display. So this was the final look of the window display for my setup. So normally in the Rompus room is where I do all my filming and ACBA setups. I have a really big table that I could set up displays and do all my filming for reviews or whatever. But I made this diorama a little too big and it hangs off the table and it's not going to work out. So I had to take apart a shelf that I keep all my comic short boxes on and set it up in the bedroom to fit the whole display. So that was pretty interesting.
You know?
So the background music I chose for my display is Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. I really like the way that Stanley Kubrick used it in A Clockwork Orange, and I thought it would set a good pace for my display. So I try to edit everything to match up with the tempo of the music. So starting off slow, trying to figure out what's going on, and then as you start figuring out what's going on, the music starts to peak and all the chaos starts unraveling. I think the only downside is that I was trying to match the tempo too much. So in this scene, I pan over the same scene 3 different times with just different angles. And at first I thought it looked legitimate because I went with the music. But in hindsight, it's a little redundant. I think especially because it's just a basic effect. Maybe if I would have had some blood spatter on the walls or some brain matter flying in the air or something a little more where you're going to want to see it from different angles. But it's kind of just a basic glob effect. I think one more thing I would have done a little different too. Instead of going the right to left pan back to the beginning to end it, I think I would have done a big zoom out so you could have seen how big the setup was. I think that would have been a little cooler. And then of course I had to dedicate my display to the man himself, Big Rowdy Roddy Piper. Rest in peace, brother.